1957. A kitchen in Indiana, late evening. The supper dishes are done and the last plate is drying on the rack. Her husband sits in the living room with the Zenith console glowing blue against the wall. Neither one has spoken a word since the pot roast went cold. She dries her hands on a flour sack towel, folds it once, hangs it on the oven handle, and walks to the bedroom alone. No fight. No slammed door, just two people in the same house who had stopped reaching for each other. These are 15 signs a 1950s marriage was quietly falling apart. Most of them happened without a single raised voice. Sign 15, she started hiding grocery money. A wife who began tucking dollar bills into hiding places around the house was not saving for a new hat. She was building the only escape route available to her. The Maxwell House coffee can behind the flour canister, a $5 bill folded inside the cover of a Betty Crocker cookbook. She clipped coupons from the A&P circular every Wednesday and pocketed the difference. A woman on a $25 weekly grocery allowance in 1956 could hide $3 or $4 a month if she was careful. A Greyhound bus ticket to her sister's house in Louisville cost $4.60. She was not planning a vacation. She was pricing her freedom, and a woman who has started counting the cost of leaving has already left in every way that matters. But long before she hid the first dollar, the trouble had already surfaced in a place every neighbor could see. Sign 14. They stopped appearing together in public. A married couple in the 1950s was a social unit. When the wife started showing up alone at church on Sunday morning, the congregation noticed before the first hymn was over. The empty pew space beside her. The excuse relayed in the narthex afterward. A cold. Overtime at the plant. The ladies' auxiliary luncheon where she arrived alone and left before the cobbler was served. The 4th of July picnic where every other family arrived in one car. A 1950s community did not need a divorce filing to know a marriage was failing. All it needed was an empty chair. And if the neighbors saw it at church, the children saw something even more telling at the supper table. Sign 13. The silence at supper. When conversation left the dinner table, the marriage had already lost its last neutral ground. The clink of a fork against the plate and nothing else. In a decade when families ate together 6 or 7 nights a week, the table was where the day was exchanged. She set the table. He sat down. Grace was said if grace was still being said. 20 minutes of chewing. He pushed his chair back. She cleared the plates alone. The entire meal completed without eye contact. When even that ritual went silent, the house had 2 strangers sharing a mortgage. Sign 12. She stopped setting his place at the table, or she started overdoing it. Small shifts in a domestic routine told the truth before anyone spoke it. A placemat left in the drawer, or a table set with military precision as if performance could fill the silence. His coffee mug not on the counter at 6 in the morning, or the opposite. The good Corning ware brought out on a Tuesday. Beef stroganoff from the new Better Homes and Gardens cookbook on a Wednesday when meatloaf would have done. A wife trying to cook her way back to something that recipes could not fix. When a woman changed the rituals she had done on autopilot for 10 years, the change was never about the ritual. It was about what the ritual used to mean. The table was one stage, but the real performance was happening somewhere far more private. Sign 11. He slept in the den. When a husband started spending the night on the Davenport or the fold-out in the spare room, the marriage had physically separated. In a decade with no language for trial separation, a different room was the closest thing to one. the olive wool army blanket folded on the couch cushion, the Zenith television turned down low at midnight. She heard it through the wall. In a Sears catalog home with paper-thin walls, everyone knew. The children knew. They heard the footsteps pass their bedroom door and keep going. A twin bed in the spare room cost $19 at Montgomery Ward in 1955. Some men bought one and never moved back. He did not pack a suitcase. He walked 12 feet down a hallway. But in a 1950s house, 12 feet was as far as a man could go. 5 signs in, and not one of them involved a raised voice. Not a single thrown dish or slammed door. That was the nature of a failing 50s marriage. It did not explode. It contracted. It got quieter. It got more polite. And that politeness was the most dangerous symptom of all, because nobody had been taught to fear silence. Not the pastor, not the family doctor, not even the couple themselves. Today, Americans spend over $23 billion a year on therapy and counseling services. In 1955, the entire concept barely existed for ordinary families. Silence was not a cry for help. Silence was just how you got through Tuesday. Sign 10. The drinking changed. A highball after work was standard in the 50s. But when the drinking moved from the living room to the garage, from Friday to Tuesday, from one glass to most of the bottle, it stopped being social. Seagram's 7 Crown, Pabst Blue Ribbon, the clink of a bottle against a glass when the house was dark, a pint of Old Crow hidden in the glove box of the Ford Fairlane. She found the empties behind the workbench. He denied every one. A pint of whiskey ran $2 in change, cheap enough to sustain, too cheap to run out. A man who drinks in secret is not relaxing. He is self-medicating. And in the 1950s, a bottle was the only therapist most men would ever sit with. She saw the bottles. He saw something in her that unsettled him just as much. Sign 9. She got a job. When a married woman with children took a part-time job in the mid-1950s, it was not always about pin money. Sometimes it was about building a life she could stand on if the floor gave way. Part-time sales clerk at Woolworth's, $1.10 an hour. Receptionist at the dentist's office 3 mornings a week. She told him it was for Christmas money. Her own paycheck, her own name on it, deposited in a separate account at the savings and loan with a passbook small enough to keep in her handbag. In 1956, many banks routinely required a husband's signature before a married woman could open any independent financial account. The money was not the point. The point was a door she could open without asking anyone's permission. Sign 8. The pastor came to dinner. When the minister showed up for a weeknight supper that was not on the church calendar, someone had called. And in the 50s, help came in a clerical collar, the good plates out again, children told to behave, a pot roast that took all afternoon. The reverend seated at the head of the table where her husband usually sat. Gentle questions between bites. How are things at home? She poured Folgers from the percolator afterward while the 2 men talked in the living room. The pastor left with a handshake and a promise to pray. Nothing changed the next morning. The church was the last institution a 50s couple trusted with their private failure. When even that intervention changed nothing, there was nowhere left to go. And sometimes it was not the church that tried to step in. It was the wife's own mother. But the visit that was supposed to help often confirmed the worst. Sign 7. She went to her mother's for a visit, and the visit got longer. A wife who packed a bag for her parents' house and stayed a week was saying something she could not say in her own kitchen. When the week became 2, the message had been received. The Samsonite suitcase pulled from the hall closet. Children buckled into the back seat. The phone calls grew shorter every night. 3 rings. I am fine. The kids are fine. Good night. Her mother's kitchen smelling like percolated coffee and cinnamon toast. The narrow bed she had slept in as a girl. She called it a visit. He called it a visit. The children believed every word. But everyone over the age of 30 in that family knew exactly what it was. Sign 6. He stopped handing over the full paycheck. In millions of 50s households, the husband cashed his check on Friday and handed the cash to his wife. She ran the house on it. When the full amount stopped arriving, the contract was broken. $47 for a week's work at a factory job in 1956. She counted it at the kitchen table. Mortgage, electric, groceries, insurance. When the envelope came up short one Friday, 42 instead of 47, she knew. Another woman, another bar tab, a bet at the track. It did not matter where. What mattered was the LIE folded inside the paper envelope. The paycheck was the handshake of a 50s marriage. When it stopped being full, neither was anything else. 10 signs in, and a pattern has become clear. A 1950s marriage did not come equipped with an emergency exit. There was no therapist on speed dial, no support group at the YMCA, no forum at 2 in the morning where someone might understand. There were 2 people in a house with a 30-year mortgage and a set of vows the entire community had witnessed. The walls did not bend. The people inside them did. Today, nearly half of all American marriages end in divorce, and the average cost of that divorce is $15,000. In the 50s, the cost was different. It was not financial. It was total social erasure. So most people simply stayed. Sign 5. The children were sent away for the summer. When the children were shipped off to a grandmother's house for an unusually long stay, it was not always generosity. Sometimes it was clearing the house for a reckoning. A Greyhound bus ticket. A brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches and an apple. 8 weeks instead of the usual 2. Then the quiet phone calls between mother and grandmother the child was not supposed to hear. Something about Daddy. Something about what she was going to do. The grandmother's house smelled like mothballs and lavender soap, a safe place that felt like exile when you were 9 years old. The children did not understand the reason until decades later. By then, most of them had children of their own, and suddenly, the summer at Grandma's made perfect, terrible sense. The children were removed from the house, but what they had already seen could never be removed from memory. Sign 4. The bedroom door stayed closed in daylight. A closed bedroom door during the daytime was an alarm in a decade when interior doors stayed open from sunrise to supper. It meant someone was crying or drinking or simply could not face the house for another hour. The brass knob that did not turn when a child reached for it. A wife still in her housecoat at 4 o'clock when supper should have been started. The Avon lipstick on the vanity untouched since Monday. Today we call it depression, a condition that affects more than 20 million American adults every year. In 1955, it did not have a clinical name in most households. It had a closed door and a mother who would be fine by tomorrow. Sign 3. He came home smelling different. A man who walked through the front door carrying a scent that did not belong to his house was carrying evidence. She did not need a detective. She had a nose, something floral when she wore Avon cotillion, the sweet heaviness of Shalimar on a wool overcoat collar, cigarette smoke when neither of them smoked. She smelled the collar when she hung the coat in the hall closet. She did not say a word. She ironed that same shirt the next morning and hung it back. In 1957, a wife who accused her husband of infidelity risked losing her home, her children, and her reputation. She was not fooled. She was trapped. And the most devastating part of a 1950s affair was not the betrayal. It was the math she had to do the morning after. Sign 2. She stopped wearing her wedding ring around the house. A gold band left on the kitchen windowsill was one of the most dangerous silent signals a 50s wife could send. The bare finger said everything. A plain gold ring. $10 at the jeweler's counter in 1952. Removed while kneading dough and left on the sill. Then left there the next day too. Then placed in the jewelry box on the dresser and not taken back out. A bare ring finger at the PTA meeting, at the Red Owl grocery store. The white indentation still visible on the skin where the band had blocked the sun for years. A man who noticed that ring on the windowsill for 3 straight days did not need to ask what it meant. He already knew. And in a decade when a woman held almost no institutional power, removing that ring was the loudest thing she could do without making a single sound. None of these signs would have made the evening news. None of them would appear in a court record. They lived in the narrow space between what a marriage looked like from the sidewalk and what it felt like from the kitchen sink. The 1950s taught an entire generation that enduring in silence was the same thing as being strong. It was not strength. It was silence dressed up in an apron and a pressed collar. And it fooled almost everyone. Sign 1. She ironed his shirts perfectly and felt nothing. The final sign a 1950s marriage had come apart was not an absence. It was a flawless performance. The wife who kept every ritual running while the woman inside the routine had already disappeared. Monday morning, the ironing board set up beside the kitchen window. The General Electric steam iron, $11 at Sears in 1954. She pressed the collar first, then the yoke, then each sleeve. The hiss of the iron on damp cotton, the smell of hot starch, every crease sharp, every gesture automatic. A woman running a household the way a person runs a machine, with precision, and nothing behind it at all. She did not stop loving him all at once. It left the way heat leaves a room after you turn off the radiator. Slowly, room by room, and by the time anyone noticed the chill, the fire had been out for a very long time. Millions of these marriages survived, not because they healed, but because leaving cost more than staying. A generation of women pressed shirts, set tables, and raised children inside homes that had gone cold years before anyone admitted it. Every daughter who watched from the hallway learned something no magazine or Sunday sermon ever had to teach her. What a marriage looks like when the love is gone, but the duty still shows up at 5:30 in the morning with a steam iron in her hand.